picking up with chapter 13, The Secret Riddle. Let's see here where I want to. Harry goes off and has another one of his lessons with Dumbledore. Harry asks if McGonagall told Dumbledore about his suspicions with, excuse me, I have to start my stopwatch, about his suspicions about Malfoy. Dumbledore says yes, but without any conclusive evidence. Okay. So Harry goes on and with Dumbledore, and we see about page 262, 263. We're actually picking up about 261 or so. Dumbledore tells Harry what happens with the locket that Marape had. And he finds out that Caractacus Burke, one of the owners of Borgin and Burke's, the Borgins and Burke, only gave her 10 galleons for this thing. Okay? And Harry says, but Marape could do magic. Why was she so poor? She could have got food and everything for herself by magic, couldn't she? Dumbledore, well, you know, maybe she could have. Though that's kind of interesting because we're going to learn in Book 7, you can't conjure up food out of thin air. You've got to have something to work with, Hermione tells Harry and Ron. So about page 262, Dumbledore tells Harry, it's also possible that her unrequited love and the attendant despair sapped her of her powers. That can happen. In any case, as you're about to see, Marape refused to raise her wand, even to save her own life. Harry, she wouldn't even stay alive for her son? That is, he can maybe understand she won't stay alive for herself, but what about her son? Dumbledore's eyebrows rise. Could you possibly be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? No, says Harry quickly. But she had a choice, didn't she? Not like my mother. Notice we're told Harry replies quickly, no. It's a spur-of-the-moment reply. What's he really attempting to do there? He's attempting, no, of course, I'm not soft. I'm not going to go soft on Voldemort. He is feeling pity for Voldemort. Why? Harry sees in Voldemort, the young baby, he sees himself. That's why he says, but my mother didn't have a choice. Marape did. And Dumbledore corrects him. Your mother had a choice, too. Harry's mother didn't have to die. Harry's mother could have let Voldemort attempt to take Harry, but she chose not to. She chose to sacrifice herself, which in a sense is also what Marape is doing. Dumbledore says, Marape Riddle chose death in spite of a son who needed her. But do not judge her too harshly, Harry. She was greatly weakened by long suffering, and she never had your mother's courage. She also probably never had the loving home and family that Harry's mother had. Which, I mean, it's pretty clear what we saw in Book 5 with Petunia talking about how, you know, Harry's mother, you know, went off to that freak school and blah, 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 blah. Okay? The impression is that Harry's parents, or Lily's parents, thought very highly of all that. Okay? Marape had a father who thought she was a complete failure and treated her like dirt. So, they go into another memory and they see Dumbledore arrive at the orphanage that Tom Riddle is raised at. Okay. And we see Dumbledore's meeting of Tom Riddle, and we see the kinds of things Tom Riddle can do, and we find out that Tom Riddle has been, if not torturing, at least abusing other students, stealing their things, causing them pain and such. Okay. And we see there at about page 272, 273 maybe. Dumbledore calls him Tom, and then says, when you go to the Leaky Cauldron, ask for a barman named Tom. And Riddle twitches. You dislike the name Tom? And we hear the 11-year-old Tom Riddle. There are a lot of Toms. Okay? What does he mean? Tom is a common name. He knows he's not common. There's something different about him. He's already told Dumbledore he can talk to snakes. But before Dumbledore leaves, Dumbledore tells him he must do something. He must give back all the things he has stolen, and he must apologize. Okay? So, they come back out of the pensive, and Harry says he was a Parselmouth, and he was able to do things. Okay? We're told about page 275 or so. Dumbledore's talking about Tom Riddle's powers and such. And he says, there were little stories of the strangled rabbit and the young boy and girl he lured into a cave. I can make them hurt if I want to. Dumbledore retells what Tom Riddle said. Okay? He goes on and says, you notice that Tom Riddle was already at 11 years old, self-sufficient. He was already determined. He was already secretive and apparently friendless. He didn't want help or companionship on his way to Diagon Alley. And he goes on and says, you will hear Death Eaters say that they are friends of Voldemort, but they're wrong. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend, nor do I believe that he's ever wanted one. And then he says, lastly, Harry, I know you're getting tired, but you got to pay attention to this. Tom Riddle liked to collect trophies. He says, this is important. Harry's still thinking, why? Why is this important? Well, Dumbledore hasn't yet told him about the Horcruxes. The Horcruxes are going to be Riddle's trophies. So we come to chapter 14. Felix Felicis. Okay. And we get the potion made. I'm going to skip a bunch. Actually, I may not even have anything to talk about in here. Let's see here. Actually, we're going to skip quite a bit. Ron does very well in the Quidditch tryouts, and about page 290, somewhere between 295, 298 or so. Hermione says, you shouldn't have done it, Harry. You heard Slughorn. It's illegal. Ron, what are you going to do? Turn us in? Harry, what are you guys talking about? Hermione, you spiked Ron's juice with Lucky Potion at breakfast. No, I didn't, says Harry. Yes, you did, Harry. That's why everything went right. That's why there were Slytherin players missing, and Ron saved everything. Harry says, I didn't put it in. And he pulls out of his jacket, or out of his robe, the little jar of Felix Felicis. He says, I wanted Ron to think I'd done it, so I faked it when I knew you were looking. You saved everything because you felt lucky, but you did it all yourself. Harry gives Ron a panacea. Okay? Ron thinks he can do what he does because of the potion. What is this showing? Ron really has it inside of him to be a great Quidditch player. And Hermione's kind of like, oh, okay. Because Ron jumps on Hermione. You only think or thought I played well because of that. You don't think I'm any good, etc. So she's kind of upset at Ron and such. So we come to chapter 15, the Unbreakable Vow. And let's see where I have the pages marked. Let's see. Picking up let's see here. Harry is talking with Slughorn and Snape about pages 317, 320, somewhere in there. And we're told, Slughorn says, "Ah, Sybil, we all think our subject's most important. But I don't think I've ever known such a natural at potions," he says, looking at Harry. "Instinctive, you know, like his mother. I've only ever taught a few with his kind of ability, I can tell you that. Sybil, why even Severus? Why even Severus what? Why even Severus wasn't as good at potions as Harry or as Lily?" Okay. So Slughorn asks Harry, "Remind me of the courses you're taking?" And Harry starts rattling them off, and Snape says, "Oh, the subject's required in short for an Auror." And Harry says, "Yeah, that's what I'd like to be. I'd like to be an Auror." And Slughorn says, "Well, you'll be a good one." Okay. And Harry goes off, and he witnesses Malfoy and Snape going off, about page 320 or so. And he eavesdrops on them, and he hears this conversation where Snape's saying to Malfoy, "I want to help you. Trust me, Draco, like you used to." And Draco's saying, "I can do it all by myself. I don't need your help," etc. And Snape says about the bottom of page 321 or so, "I'm trying to help you. I swore to your mother I would protect you. I made the Unbreakable Vow, Draco." Draco says, "Looks like you'll have to break it then." Draco should know what that means. If Snape breaks the Unbreakable Vow, Snape dies. Right? "Snape, if you tell me what you're trying to do, I can assist you." Snape says, I don't need your, Draco says, "I don't need your help," etc. Okay? So this is kind of interesting. Draco has always looked up to Snape. He's always followed Snape's every word. And now he sees that Draco is in opposition to Snape. Okay? So, chapter 16. It begins with Harry telling Ron and some others about the Unbreakable Vow. And Harry says, "What happens if you break it?" "Ron, you die. Fred and George tried to get me to make one when I was about 5. Nearly did, too. Holding hands with Fred and everything when Dad found us. He went mental. Wouldn't the Unbreakable Vow be somewhat serious magic? Would a 5-year-old really be able to do that? Notice you also need a wand. How does Ron have a wand? How do Fred and George have wands?" Again, there's problems with what Rowling says that children are able to do when they have to really learn the magic and everything once they go off to school. Okay, skipping several more pages. Harry tells the others about what Snape and Malfoy were talking about. And they talk about, when they're off at Christmas, they talk about Fenrir Greyback and such. And we're going to skip quite a bit. And we come to about page 343. Scrimgeour comes to Harry and he asks for Harry's help. He asks for Harry to stand up for the Ministry of Magic and to kind of essentially do, public service announcements. And Harry says to the minister, I don't really know what you mean. And the minister says, "Well, of course, to you it will matter enormously. But to the wizarding community at large, it's all perception, isn't it? It's what people believe that's important. That becomes, as we've talked in class, vitally important in Book 7. It is what people believe." And so Harry says, "Oh, I get it. So what you want people to believe is that I'm helping the Ministry of Magic when in fact I'm not? And you want the people to believe that the Ministry of Magic is actually doing something when they're not?" "No," Harry says. And we'll pick up there with the third lecture.